Hello everybody and welcome to another top 5 board gaming video. Today's topic is all about games that have the potential to become classics. In other words, what are this era's games that are going to be the next chess or Go or backgammon, something along those lines where people will be playing it for not only years but decades or even centuries from now. We have a lot of games that have been released relatively recently especially, and so we have to think which of these are really going to stay around that our children's children will still know about, and even going beyond that. It's an interesting thing to talk about, especially with so many games, and so as always I'm really curious what you guys have to say. What are your personal picks for this? Let me know anything and everything you think in the comments below, because you guys know I love to hear from you. But with that said, we're going to get right on in with my number 5. At number 5, I've got King Domino. I like this game as a potential classic because it builds off of the already known idea of dominoes. And in this case, you're just matching terrain values instead of adding up pips or numbers or whatever they happen to be on the dominoes themselves. But the idea being that it's still a very simple game. It's a very simple concept, really easy to play, and reasonably strategic. It's also relatively abstract, so you can get a lot of different people from a lot of different cultures able to play it relatively easily with a somewhat language independent thing. You do still have to read a decent amount, and there is a flow to the game, so it can take some getting used to, and that's why it's a little bit lower on the list. It's still a great game though. King Domino, my number 5. At number 4, I've got Oni Tama, a beautiful game that is extremely reminiscent of chess, but allows you to have a lot more varied replayability compared to something like chess or checkers or some of these more simplistic abstract games. I really like this game because, similarly to a lot of other classic games, it's relatively easy to pick up and play, but at the same time it can be virtually impossible to master. In this case, especially because you have cards that dictate how you're able to move your particular pieces at any given time. The really nice thing is that it becomes language independent because you have images that show you how you're able to move the pieces, and so you have to obey those specific rules at a specific time. That said, it's a little bit lower on the list because I think people will find it a little bit too similar to chess, and so it might be a little bit tougher to sort of squeeze into that particular role. But the fact that it's a little bit unique and different gives it a better chance in my opinion, so Oni Tama is my number 4. At number 3, I've got Soto, the game of the path. This is a very simple game where you're placing down tiles to guide your and your opponent's pieces along particular paths and trying to keep yours on the board as long as possible. As far as making it a classic is concerned, I love the fact that, like some of the others, it is completely language independent. You don't have to worry about that. You have very, very simple mechanics that are extremely easy to learn. Essentially what I said is exactly how you play it, and you just go around in turns placing down tiles. That's really all it is. The things that I don't really like in terms of it becoming a classic is that the games tend to be very, very short. They also tend to be more luck-based because you do have this giant stack of tiles and you might not be able to get the exact one that you really need, or you might just get unlucky and you're stuck and you sort of paint yourself in a corner type of thing, and then you're in big trouble. On top of that, because you have player elimination, it means that people will end up sitting out, but again, it is very simple to learn, very simple to play, plays a lot of people simultaneously, so it can really work well for a lot of different situations and for a lot of different people. Soto, my number 3. At number 2, I've got Blucas. This is a grid-filling shape placement game where the idea is that you have some awkwardly shaped pieces in a large grid, and you and your opponents are trying to put as many of your pieces onto the grid as you can using a small handful of rules regarding how and where you can place them. It's a very simple game, and I love it for being a potential classic because you have no hidden information, which is very common with games like this. You also have the very high strategic aspect of it, where you have a very pure strategy of what's going to be best for you and your future and against your opponents and all of that kind of thing. In addition, you also have team play as well as other versatile different play types where you can have free-for-all, 1 versus 1, 2 versus 2, all sorts of different stuff like that. However, as a minor detriment, there are other games that do this. You have things like Cathedral, you've also got Patchwork, and there's a handful of others that have a very similar mechanic in terms of you're taking these sort of awkwardly shaped pieces and trying to fit them into a grid. So in that sense, as far as a classic is concerned, it's like which one is going to come out on top. I personally don't really know, but I like Blucas for all of these aspects and as a classic as a whole, so it is my number 2. At number 1, I've got Hive, the game about bugs, where essentially you're trying to surround your opponent's queen, and that means that you win. So obviously there is a lot of influence from things like chess in this particular game, where you have individual piece types that move in very specific ways around the grid. And as far as a classic aspect is concerned, I absolutely love it. Similarly to some of the other ones here, you don't have any hidden information here. Everybody has the same types of pieces, but you also have a much more abstract play area. You don't have something that's really set like a chessboard. Instead, you and your opponent are actually building up the board as you go through and as you play. You're going to be placing your insects, you're going to be moving them around in specific ways, and so your play area becomes very dynamic. On top of that, there are already a lot of different versions of Hive, where you've got this one, the base one. You also have a pocket Hive, a travel version. You've got several different expansions, and a lot of people already have it as a modern classic in that context. In addition, like all of the other ones that I mentioned, you have a lot of language independence aspects, so you don't need to really be able to read, except for the fact that you just need to know how the pieces move. But once you know that, you're good to go. On top of that, you can even arguably make your own pieces for this. All you need is to make these little octagonal shapes, and then you need to carve something small in them, and then boom, you've got your own version of Hive, or you can make your own expansions, however you want to do it. It's a wonderful game. I think that it works really well as a potential classic, and so it is my number 1. Well, everybody, that's going to be it for me. I hope that you enjoyed this video on my top 5 personal favorite games that I believe can become classics both in and beyond our time. Now, as you can see from my personal list, I went with a lot of abstract language independent games because in general those tend to be a little bit more common as far as what becomes classic. But that said, we're in sort of a golden age of board gaming. There are a ton of different hobby games, there are a ton of different mechanics and styles and all sorts of different things like that. So any number of them could potentially become classics in their own right or in their own way. So of course, as always, I'm really curious what you guys have to say. What are your particular mechanics that you would think could have more potential to become classic? Do you like my picks? Do you have your own? You guys know I love to hear from you. Share anything and everything in the comments below. But with that, as always, if you haven't done so already, please take a look at all my various social media pages, as well as my Patreon page. On all of those, you'll be able to interact with myself and my channel in a whole bunch of really fun ways. But with that, thank you very much again for watching the video. I hope that you enjoyed it, and I will see you next time.